How do you choose which university to go to when all of them are knocking on your door? We've got Girls Runner of the Year for the state of Texas, Colleen Stegman, on the show today to answer that exact question. We're also unveiling the dark side of Dak Prescott and talking about how un-American drafts really are. Welcome to episode 2 of Quarantine Conversations here on FridayNightGlory.com. I am your host, Christian Dutcher. Roll that title card. It feels great to be back. We've decided to move sets, get outdoors, and get some fresh air. I just wanted to thank y'all for listening to episode 1. It was a great response. I'm so glad y'all enjoyed it. We decided to ramp it up this year or this episode, and get one of the best runners in the nation. Colleen Stegman is going to be on the show later today, as I mentioned before. But first, let's not waste any time and get right into some headlines. Okay, so our first story is a story we missed out about an hour, legitimately. We record on Mondays, and so we recorded the episode, and then this news came out, and I was like, dang it. But Prosper Police reported that Cowboys star quarterback Dak Prescott was found hosting a party at his weekend, which was now 2 weekends ago. This shocked me, and believe me, people who have known me for a long time that I've been very critical of the Cowboys organization. I don't like the way they handle business. I don't like a lot about their team, and you won't see me wearing a star across my chest anytime soon. But one thing I could never criticize was the way in which star quarterback Dak Prescott conducted himself. Until now. Dak Prescott has supposedly been frustrated with the media's coverage of this situation and gone on TV saying, "It was less than 10 people, it's not a big deal." I could not disagree more. Whether it's less than 10 people, whether it's 30 people, there is guidelines put in place for the safety of America as a whole. And you, being a public figure, an influencer, have an important role in following those guidelines. And doing that is a disservice. Furthermore, if you were frustrated with the way the media was covering this, I don't understand why you wouldn't have learned your lesson from the first time. That's right, Dak Prescott, this isn't the first time you've been caught red-handed. In fact, you posted on social media earlier in March a picture of you arm in arm with Des Bryant and Ezekiel Elliott showing y'all working out. Now, y'all aren't living together, and thereby you received poor response from taking that action. So, if you were unhappy with the way it was perceived, then don't put yourself in a position to where those same comments can be made a second time. Because all you're showing people is that you're just as ignorant as they thought you were, and you don't care about anything that's going on right now. Now, there's a lot of noise going on right now about whether this will affect whether he can get re-signed. And let's be real here. This is Jerry Jones. This is a man who got tons of media coverage for the Cowboys when they didn't even make the playoffs. They were talked about every week during the playoffs, and they weren't even in it. Jerry Jones doesn't care whether it's good or bad reflecting on his team. He just cares that his team is being talked about. It's why they've kept Ezekiel Elliott despite his bad behavior. But Dak has put himself in an interesting position. Because whether or not they really care about this, This can totally be used to justify any decision they make about not re-signing Dak. And at a time when you don't know that you'll be playing for the Cowboys next year, I feel like it would be vital that you're on your best behavior. Anyway, let's move on to our next story. This one comes, this one's a little exciting. It's, last week we talked about the XFL's Sun closure and what we were going to do with Globe Life Park. It's our first follow-up on the story. We actually now know Arlington ISD has announced that they will be utilizing Globe Life Park for 14 regular season football games for their various 6 high schools across the city. They will also be offering up the venue for postseason games all the way up to the state semi-finals. Now, let me be clear, this is Dallas Renegades home and former Rangers home, Globe Life Park, not the new Globe Life Field, which was falsely reported by some news outlets. Whether this was talked about before or after the XFL's closure, I still think this is an amazing opportunity for more athletes in the state of Texas to play in these first-class venues. When the Star kind of first happened, quote unquote, people thought it was such a cool experience for these athletes to call that their home, and we're seeing more and more school districts finding a way to give these athletes those really once-in-a-lifetime opportunities to call world-class venues their home. Now, I was curious if this would replace playoff games at the Star, and what I mean by that is the Ford Center has become a athlete favorite for playoff games. Whenever there's a playoff game, teams tend to fight over getting to play at the Star. Typically, there are obviously some outliers, but I went online and found a survey which actually found that a overwhelming majority would still rather play at the Star in Frisco. Now, that's not to demean anything, that any opportunity that these Arlington ISD kids are getting at Globe Life Park, but I did find it interesting that despite this new opportunity, many people would still prefer the dome that is Jerry World. Our next story is a little bit of soccer news, so we'll see how this goes over. But Liga MX, the top division of soccer over in Mexico, has suspended promotion and relegation for the next 5 years. For those who are unfamiliar, promotion and relegation, or more commonly known as Pro-Rel, is a set of rules specifically in soccer which rotate the teams in the top division dependent on their success as a team. An example we can kind of imagine in the United States is if we had the 30 MLB teams and, for example, Seattle finished last, but the Frisco Rough Riders finished first of the MLB. Obviously, this isn't a realistic example, but those two teams would switch, and that's how it works. Soccer globally, it's actually in FIFA's bylaws that you have these rules set up in your league. Two nations that have never followed those rules are, of course, the United States and Australia, and we can kind of dive into the various lawsuits that have happened as a result of it, but that's a whole nother story. It's interesting, though, because earlier this year we had reports that Liga MX would be merging with Major League Soccer for a Superliga type league where I guess what they were calling it was the North American Super League, but basically it's a big league with the best teams in soccer all across North America. And at the time, I didn't really give any credit to anything this was saying. Primarily because um, MLS's rapid expansion was just nowhere near close to where you could support something like that. MLS is at 30 teams announced right now. We're looking at 32, 34. Don Garber has no limits on how many teams he'll put into the league. And so it's fascinating to see how many he'll actually put. But to think that we could add another 18 or 20, I don't remember exactly how many are in Liga MX, but if all those teams are together, it just feels like an oversaturated league, in a league in which would actually have promotion relegation as a necessity, not as option. Finally, let's finish out on this last story. Sorry for the cars, but sports may be back as we know it, and no, I'm not talking about The Last Dance. I'm of course talking about President Trump and the CDC's new guidelines for reopening America. The three-step plan involves opening businesses, sports venues, and even eventually schools, contingent upon the virus's progression. One of the things we know now is that sunlight may actually contribute to the killing of this virus, which could be very beneficial in terms of defeating this thing, at least for the summer, and kind of having businesses start reopening and start making back up lost profits. With that in mind, states are already beginning to announce dates for reopening following this three-step plan. The first one, of course, is our home state, the state of Texas. Now, with that being said, this does not change the type of sporting events which hit closest to home, and that's high school athletics. After President Trump rolled out the guidelines, Governor Abbott announced that Texas wouldn't be entering phase 2 before the end of this school year, effectively closing all schools until next school year. This has already been done in a number of states, and it will likely be followed by almost every state in America. I can imagine will probably cancel school throughout the rest of the school year just to be safe, because we know that schools are typically breeding grounds for certain viruses. But in light of this announcement, school districts are announcing the continuation of e-learning, and the University Interscholastic League has canceled all remaining competitions. And if you scrolled through Twitter over the past 5 days, you will have seen widespread heartbreak, which is filling the hearts of seniors. And it's been really tough to watch, to kind of see the pain that they're going through, realizing that they've already played their last game. A lot of these people are super close to me, and as a reporter, as someone who has a outlet, I figured I should do something about it. So this Sunday, April 26th at 5 p.m., I will be hosting a special edition of Quarantine Conversations, a salute to the senior class. We're going to be talking with some seniors. We're going to be listening to many of the tweets that these seniors have posted, and honestly, in the big scheme of things, just honoring them as much as we can. I think it's a super cool opportunity for us to recognize these seniors who have lost their senior night. April 26th was actually a day after when Reedy softball was scheduled to have their senior night, and a week prior for many baseball teams to have their senior night. So, that's what we're gonna do. So join us. If you want you or your senior to be recognized, go on Twitter, Instagram, any of it. I'll be checking it all. Use the hashtag QC Senior Salute. That is QC Senior Salute. And we'll try and compile as many tweets as possible into that show. Without further ado, I talked to Colleen Stegman earlier this morning. Here's what she had to say. Hey guys, I have the pleasure of sitting down with 5A state champion in Texas Girls Runner of the Year as named by a sports drink company, which I've been told not to say on air. We're going to welcome Reedy Cross Country and Track's Colleen Stegman. Colleen, how are you doing this morning?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for being on. It's our pleasure. So, obviously, I guess we should start by addressing the elephant in the room. What were you thinking when you heard Greg Abbott's announcement and the subsequent UIL announcement that school and high school athletics would not be continuing this year?
Obviously, it was hard to hear. I think at that point it was pretty much expected. That way, we wouldn't be able to continue giving the situation. But obviously, I think it was the right decision. But still disappointing. So.
Of course. We'll come back and address the current situation a little bit, but I want to talk about your record-breaking cross-country season this year. How did you feel about your performance, first of all?
I thought it went really well. Honestly, the season went pretty much as well as I could have asked for or wanted it to go. So it's definitely kind of a dream season.
So I'm always curious about this. Often you are so far ahead of competitors while racing, and so I just want to know what goes through your mind while racing, and what keeps you pushing yourself when no one else is even behind you to push you?
Honestly, just I guess the thought of trying to run the best I can, run the best time. This year I was fortunate enough to be in a lot of competitive races, so that wasn't the case very often. This year, definitely in the past, it's kind of just like a mind game and really mental. Just working on pushing, my mental limits almost more than my physical.
For sure. So correct me if I'm wrong. The Reedy girls cross country team went to NXR South, and you went to Nike Cross Nationals. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So tell us about both those experiences and what was it like?
NXR was super fun. Obviously having some of the girls from the team there was a super fun experience. It's obviously really fun running a competitive race and all the Nike gear and everything. So NXR was really fun. I had a really good race, which was awesome. And obviously qualifying was just so cool and awesome. And then NXM was crazy. It was definitely probably so far one of the coolest moments of my running career, and just getting to meet all those girls and get all the gear, and then obviously running the race. It was just kind of just such a cool experience.
Totally. So as I mentioned earlier, you received the highest award at the state level for cross country, being named Runner of the Year. Can you tell us about how and when you kind of found that out?
So I found out I was a finalist for the award, I think a couple of weeks prior. And then they said it would be announced that day. It was a Monday morning, but obviously I was up at 6 a.m. I was not thinking about it, kind of wasn't on my mind. So we're just doing our long run. I was running with some of the girls in our team. Coach Watt's been biking with us. And all of a sudden she just pulls out her phone, and I figured, we're pretty active on social media. So I said, we're just getting a video, it's from the first long runs of the season. We're just gonna get some content for the Instagram and the Twitter. I don't really think anything of it. And then she's like, hey girl, I just want to tell you you're running with, the unnamed sports drink player of the year. And I was shocked. I was huh? Did she say that? But it was a really cool moment, especially having all my teammates there, who have been, obviously some of my closest friends and have been a big help. And then obviously my coach. It was just a really special moment.
So I'm not sure how much of this you have shared publicly, but being friends with you and your family, I know that you've kind of been sought out by many Division I universities and gone on a couple visits. Can you give us a little insight on what you are looking for from a university and a collegiate team, and how you're going to choose which school you go to next fall?
Yeah, so I guess for me, the big things are I definitely want a school with obviously good athletics, good running program, and then good academics. Obviously that degree that I'm going to get is going to be really important. So definitely want a place with good education. And then I think right now I'm leaning a little bit more towards a college town. I'm not 100% certain on that, but just from the campuses I've visited, I think that's something that appeals to me. And then somewhere with a little bit warmer weather. I'm not a fan of the the freezing cold. So weather's probably like the lowest like thing out of those four, but obviously a little nicer weather and a little bit more southernish probably.
Have you given any thought into what degree you might be pursuing?
No. No, not it. Trying to figure that out, but.
So let's get back, obviously, to the current situation. Can you kind of tell us about how Coach Watts has been trying to keep y'all active and keep pushing y'all despite not even being able to be within 6 feet of y'all?
Yeah, so she does a great job like keeping up with our training. So she sends us like a training plan every week, and then we submit a log, at the end of that week. So like training wise, that's what we do. And then we've been doing lots of Zoom calls. So we did a team Zoom call right when school got canceled after spring break. We did one, and then we have like little track families with like 7-8 girls. So we FaceTime, each like family FaceTimed her just a few weeks later to talk about how things were going and whatnot. And then just this week, like the varsity girls, we had a Zoom call with her, and we just did like our strength mobility, just kind of chat and like catch up, and just try and stay in contact as much as possible, and just keep working on like that team culture and team atmosphere, even though we can't, physically be with each other.
Yeah, obviously that culture is important team culture is important to keep up. So what specifically in terms of training have you been doing to stay in shape? Obviously, you don't necessarily need a gym to keep running, but
yeah. So runners we're pretty lucky because we don't have to have a gym. We can all still do our sport. But yeah, I've been doing pretty much sticking to the same training schedule as usual. So we just kind of do long run, 2 workouts, 2 recovery runs, and a medium long run every week. So training-wise, nothing's really changed other than obviously all our runs are solo. And then we pretty much do, like our core exercises, some strength mobility, some like body weight kind of stuff. And yeah.
So can you kind of talk to us about your last track meet and what was going through your mind? Obviously, I can't imagine it was this, but...
No, yeah, honestly, like at that point, I really don't think anyone had really realized, like, oh gosh, like this is so serious. Like obviously we knew about it, but it's kind of crazy that at that time we, it was a big meet. There's so many kids right next to each other. And now, I mean, that's just like unthinkable. But yeah, I mean, it was, we were all having fun. Like, I don't really think anyone would have believed you if you said that had been the last meet of the year. But yeah, it was a really fun meet actually. It was kind of a different setup, so we really got to, cheer on all our teammates and whatnot, because they kind of flipped the way the meets normally run. Personally, it was not the best race for me. I was feeling a little, but yeah, it's kind of crazy to look back and think that was the end of our track season.
Yeah. So y'all were fortunate enough to actually compete once more after that. There was this virtual track meet. Can you kind of explain to the viewers what that was about and kind of how was it conducted?
Yeah, so just, kind of keep the competition between FISD, have some fun. Obviously what we can't compete like right next to each other. So yeah, what we did is, you had like a week to go out and run whatever. I think there was 5 distances. I think it was the 200, 400, 800, 1600, 3200. And basically, you just got to go out, choose whatever you wanted to run. Then you kind of had to submit proof of like your watch or, stopwatch or whatnot. And then they kind of just totaled the points. It was super fun. It's just a way for us, kind of get a little competition in and just have some fun.
So obviously you're very close with a lot of the people on the team. Can you kind of tell us what the sentiment among the seniors is kind of right now?
Obviously they're bummed, a lot of them, after having such a successful cross country season, they're really looking forward to closing out high school kind of with a bang. And, as a team, we had pretty big goals. We had a great team this year. And, these seniors are some of the people that kind of, laid the foundation for the program, years ago. And so obviously it's hard for them to not get to finish that out. But, I think for them, they just want us to keep, the winning kind of tradition going and, just kind of do it for them.
Have y'all given any thought as to, obviously Frisco ISD has said way back in early April that we were going to stop all banquets and stuff, but have y'all given any thought about to like a virtual banquet or any kind of way to just a final recognition for those seniors?
I haven't heard anything about that. I'm sure something's in the works. You know, Coach Watts is awesome about recognizing those kids and all that, so I'm sure we'll do something.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you sitting down with me today, Colleen. Is there anything else you want to share?
No, I think that's everything.
All right. Well, thank you for joining with me.
When we come back, we're going to take a deep dive into how un-American drafts really are. We'll be right back on FridayNightGlory.com.
Give me 2 claps. Roll.
It's now time for a message from Reedy Principal, Mr. Z.
4 lines roll.
This has been a message from Reedy Principal, Mr. Z. We of course want to thank Colleen again for coming on the show, and we wish her the best as she begins to prepare for her final cross-country season this fall. As we transition from talking about one player of the year to another, let's unpack the NFL draft. It'll take place beginning Thursday evening with what we assume to be the Cincinnati Bengals picking Joe Burrow with what we presume to be the first pick. And if you may have noticed, I've been using a lot of modifiers there. Assume, presume, and you may be wondering why. Well, if we've learned anything from past drafts, we know nothing is certain, and you should expect the unexpected. The talking heads over at ESPN, Fox Sports, and The Ticket would have you believe that it is indisputable the Bengals will be picking Joe Burrow. There's some problems with that, though. I don't know if either party wants to be a part of the other party. I'm not suggesting that Joe Burrow isn't the best player in the draft pool. In fact, I believe the exact opposite. There's no question he is the best quarterback, the best player in this draft pool. But with certain comments made by Joe Burrow last week, Cincinnati may not want to take that risk of bringing in a player that's not going to be loyal to the organization. Now, originally I was going to do a deep dive based on this premise, because I think it would be an interesting one to explore, and who else would they draft and stuff like that. But one of Joe Burrow's comments caught my attention, and I couldn't help but look into it and share with you what I thought. So for today's deep dive, we're going to explore when the draft began, how it happens, and why it is both uniquely American and yet the most un-American part of sports. The NFL draft began on February 8th, 1936 at the Ritz-Carlton, Philadelphia. It was created in response to Stan Koska, a running back from the University of Minnesota who had just finished an amazing collegiate career and was looking into playing in the NFL. Because he was so highly coveted, however, he just sat back and waited for the biggest offer. That's what many players worldwide do today. It's why there's this thing called the transfer window in soccer, because players just go wherever the money is, and yes, that tends to be the same couple of clubs. However, in the NFL, there was one problem. There were really no other sports leagues per se that they were competing against. When we talk about soccer, there is 1,000,001 leagues, from La Liga to Liga MX to Premier League to MLS. There's just too many. Bundesliga, there's I could go on and on. But for the NFL, they didn't want their teams to fight against one another, except on the gridiron, of course. So what they did is they created a draft. That way, the player just went to whatever team chose him. Now, as the details were being worked out, Burt Bell, owner of the Philadelphia Eagles at the time, was getting a little bit frustrated. This is because he felt like because he wasn't able to get Stan Koska, he was going to be unsuccessful. His money wouldn't be able to do any, because the dominant teams of the era, Bears, Packers, Giants, Redskins, would be affecting his ability to sell tickets and merchandise, and therefore hurting his bottom line. To fix this issue, he argued that the players that did the worst the previous season should get the highest draft picks. It was that simple. And the NFL unanimously agreed. So all the owners signed, and the proposal was approved. Anyway, no one really batted an eye at this, even to this day, until the claims made by Joe Burrow. And these were fascinating to me. He said on ESPN Radio Baton Rouge, when asked about playing for the Bengals organization, that he found it odd that in a capitalistic society, the biggest one being America, he found it odd that we sent the best players to the worst teams, citing that, with engineers, we don't send the best engineers of their class to the worst companies. They're obviously signed to the best companies. But in sports, it's uniquely American to have a draft. Now, the NFL argues that they do this to protect their team's investment, to keep the league interesting. And is that true? Would teams just all of a sudden not want to compete, just leave the league if they felt like they weren't getting any of the best players? Well, I don't know. The English Premier League seems to have a rotating cast of teams who always want to burst into the sunlight, but they also have the same few teams who seem to win and win and win. Think Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester United, Manchester City. So what we might have is, if this draft wasn't instituted, the Packers still being the best team in the league every year. Am I saying that wouldn't happen? No. I don't know. But what you wouldn't also have if you didn't have a draft, would be tanking. The idea of tanking is something that has become increasingly popular by sports teams and increasingly hated against fans. If there was no option to, tank and get the best player next year, you would likely have teams competing to get those best players. But those players would also likely go to the best teams. Like I said, the Packers, or of today, the Patriots. Here's what I'll say. I agree with Joe Burrow here. It is an interesting part of American sports, and I found it fascinating looking through all the parts of the NFL draft, kind of how it started, this and that. And that being said, the draft is so deeply ingrained in American sports that it's not going to change, nor do I think it should. The NFL makes a ton of money off the NFL draft, especially now that they hold it in rotating cities. I think Nashville, Vegas, these were all big projects that were going to bring in money. in terms of Joe Burrow, Joe Burrow's a winner. And I think he's a little bit frustrated that he won't be going to a winning team. However, the idea that Joe Burrow won't be playing with the Bengals, I think, is ludicrous, because any team that passes up Joe Burrow better prove that their quarterback can do the job tenfold better than what Burrow would have done for them. And the Bengals, well, it's not even close. Anyway, I appreciate y'all for joining me for yet another episode of Quarantine Conversations. If you're listening to the audio version, you may not be aware that we're shooting in video. Check it out on the Friday Night Glory YouTube page, and if for those of you who are watching the video version, we also post an audio version in case you gotta go run to the store, because that is the only place you should be going social distance. Anyway, join us next week as we bring on... Y'all thought I was gonna tell you who we've got on the show? Of course not. You gotta watch next week to see. We'll be back next Tuesday with episode 3 of Quarantine Conversations, but don't forget, we'll be live on Friday Night Glory's YouTube page at 5 p.m. doing Quarantine Conversations, a salute to the senior class. If you need more conversations from this quarantine, check out Maya Peterson in the Sports Isolation Podcast and Parker Turley in the PT Sports Podcast. From all of us here at Friday Night Glory, stay safe, and we'll see y'all next week.